Hey everybody, welcome to the GarthCast for today, January 25th, 2021. On today's show, Garth sang at this past week's inauguration of the 46th President of the United States. I would like to continue with coverage of the previously mentioned Globe article that Garth again appeared in this past week. I would also like to make a brief shout out to Queenie and her gang for the advice that was given. If it was meant for me, I don't know whether it was or not. Regardless, I'd like to give a brief shout out and say, geez, thanks. I would also like to continue the discussion of the collecting of Garth Brooks memorabilia and collecting of Garth Brooks songs that kind of helped shape the fandom as to where I got and how I got to where I am as a fan of Garth. And finally then, I would also like to, again, share two covers. One of them being We Belong to Each Other, another cover by Jim Gegner. I thought it was an incredible job, also very timely and very well-fitting. And also another Garth cover, this one being In Lonesome Dove by a man named John Rainey. This one I was inspired to look up after going through some of the discussion this past week on the Garth Brooks message boards, Facebook groups, where we were discussing the song In Lonesome Dove and really who is the one who does the shooting in the end of the song. Some people in the discussion said it was the mother. Some people said it was the son. And the discussion kind of went back and forth. So that's what led me to look for that cover. First up on the GarthCast today, though, just a real quick look back at Garth's involvement this week in the inauguration of Joe Biden. Garth was one of three people that sang at the inauguration, and from what many people have seemingly said, and from the feedback I've seen and the discussion I've seen online, Garth did seem to do perhaps and probably the best job of any of the three. Garth did an a cappella rendition of Amazing Grace, and Garth really did an amazing job, no pun intended, of managing to not only show the importance and the magnitude of the performance itself in the inauguration, but also to bring an unintended or intended focus on what he had said was his goal. That is, this performance not being a political statement at all, or an endorsement necessarily of any particular candidate, but rather being an example of unity, an example of Garth getting a chance to serve his country in the way he's asked. Our next story, continuing coverage of the previously mentioned Globe article from the magazine that was dated January 25th, 2021. On this magazine, Garth and Trisha appeared in a small picture in the bottom right-hand corner of the cover, where Garth and Trisha's marriage is on the rocks, according to the headline. Inside the magazine, though, on page 10, and spreading over into page 11, is the headline, Trisha lays down law. Marriage crisis as Slob Garth is ordered to clean up his act. The article begins, Garth Brooks' sloppy habits during 9 months of lockdown have iron-willed wife Trisha Yearwood in a tizzy, says pals who insist their marriage is dangling by a thread. After she clobbered the slob with a strict set of house rules. After exasperated Trisha spilled her guts to pals, a friend advised the songbird to put the rules in writing and hang it up where he'll see it. And she did, dishes a source. But pals fear the 56-year-old country queen's demanding ways are pushing the 58-year-old friends-in-low places cowboy to the brink. I think Garth especially is ready to walk unless they can find middle ground, tattles the source. One that doesn't include Trisha calling all the shots. The current tiff is the result of COVID lockdown that's gotten them onto each other's nerves big time, says the source. Trisha feels Garth's hygiene has gone to pot, spies claim, and other habits of his are driving her up the wall, too. She's given him a list of do's and don'ts that include wearing deodorant at all times, stop leaving his bathroom a mess, and remove his clothes from the dryer once he's done, an insider spills. But at the top of Trisha's list is a ban on Garth's constant whistling that has her pulling her hair out, says the insider. It's not just like the occasional whistle. It's really like a 24/7 thing, Trisha complains. The thunder rolls, Stud admits. I whistle everywhere I go. It drives her absolutely nuts, and she's been so sweet to put up with it. But not anymore. Garth has admitted that their discussions can be intense, but Trisha insists he listens to me, and I'm usually right. Says the insider, Trisha rules the roost, and Garth must follow if he wants to keep the peace. But that's getting harder. Of course, if you have had any experience in watching anything Garth and Trisha have done over the last few months, namely their holiday special on CBS in the latter half of December, you kind of were able to maybe see right through this article and laugh at the part that Garth's whistling has become an issue for Trisha Yearwood. I mean, realistically, they talked about it, they laughed about it. It's not that big a deal. All right, now on the next part of the GarthCast, I just want to make a really quick shout out to Queenie and her crew. Not to go too far into it, not to go too in depth into it, but there were a few things that were mentioned in a recent video that she put out, and one of those things that was mentioned kind of seemed to be directed somewhat at the GarthCast, and I thought I would just kind of throw in a real quick comment on it. When I complete a GarthCast and I publish it, I also usually put out a video version on YouTube as well, mainly so that the covers that I am featuring of the up-and-coming artists can get a little more exposure, and also so that the artists who are covering Garth songs on their videos are given credit for the awesome work that they do. However, I am not one that has really felt the need to be putting myself out on camera. And this is the advice I was given concerning that.
It is better if you just show some empty, meaningless picture, and you never show your face.
Thank you for that piece of advice. It is something I will take to heart and will continue to use to evaluate future GarthCast YouTube videos. Now, I don't know if this was specifically directed towards the GarthCast or not. If it was, okay, thank you for the advice. If it was not, okay, I'm sorry, I'm taking it as such and using it to improve the GarthCast's performance. There was another piece of unsolicited advice that was given that also could be used as something that the GarthCast should really take under advisement. That advice was the following.
And whatever you do, please, no matter how excited you are, do not let the enthusiasm come into your voice.
Thanks for the advice on this, Queenie. I am actually trying to do a better job of getting my enthusiasm and my tone more natural into these GarthCasts, and I do thank you for listening and for giving me that advice. Next up on the GarthCast, the collecting saga of mine, part 2, when it comes to Garth. A kind of more of a look at a journey through my fandom. It was roughly around 1992. I was in college, and as I was becoming more and more of a fan of Garth, I seemed to develop kind of a need to be like a sponge as far as Garth's music, and pretty much anything I could, Garth-wise. I started collecting shirts where I could find them. I started collecting posters, different music, books, you name it. There were things like the Garth Brooks scrapbook. There were 3 or 4 different posters in the bookstore at my college, and these were different things that I thought I would collect and ended up starting being a basis for my Garth collection. I ended up putting an ad in a country music magazine in their like trading post type of section, and I managed to pick up a few rather good pieces of memorabilia, including what I found to be at that time my holy grail, if you would, of my collection. 45 vinyl recording of the live Thunder Rolls and Friends in Low Places versions that had been featured in the recently aired This Is Garth Brooks special on NBC. Now, all throughout college, I kept collecting and I kept building my music collection of Garth. Anything I could get from Garth, I would try to collect. Admittedly, not as much music and stuff as I wanted, but I was starting to do things like taping appearances that he had on TV where I could have people tape them for me when I couldn't get to them. I started collecting some unofficial bootleg shows of Garth from his live concerts, and it was around this time that I began to be aware of and become exposed to a collection called The Hungry Years, which was recordings of Garth from Willie's Saloon in Stillwater, Oklahoma, made in 1986 before he went to Nashville and became the star that he is today. This will be something that we talk about on the GarthCast in the future, as we could talk for quite a while about it, explaining the different versions, the different songs, the track listing, you name it. I never had anyone buy me anything Garth Brooks-wise for Christmas, birthday, you name it, after the first Christmas where I ended up completing my collection of Garth's songbooks. The reason why I ended up never having anyone purchase me anything Garth-wise was really simple. It was a situation where I would have everything else already by the time they would be able to purchase it for me. On the next GarthCast, I'd like to talk about the internet side of things and how my focus kind of came to lie in the audio-visual area and away from the physical memorabilia area. But for now on the GarthCast, I'd like to close out with, again, 2 more Garth Brooks covers. The first one, a Jim Gegner cover where he sings Garth's song, We Belong to Each Other, and then a cover of In Lonesome Dove by John Rainey, who does an excellent job as well. The actual video versions of these songs will be up with the video version of the GarthCast on YouTube soon after this podcast is published. Until next time, for the GarthCast, keep believing.
Ain't no wall can divide us, no matter how high. Ain't no stone can untie us, for all that may try. We're all leaves on the same tree, under one sky. Don't let nobody tell you otherwise. We belong to each other. We are sister and brother, born to love one another. It's whispered by the wind to all living things. It's in every sunrise. It's what the wild birds sing. Shines in newborn eyes, faces lined and warm. It's the tie that binds us all, and it won't be torn. We belong to each other. We are sister and brother, born to love one another. We belong to each other. We are sister and brother, born to love one another.
She was a girl on a wagon train, headed west across the plain. The train got lost in a summer storm. They couldn't move west and they couldn't go home. She saw him riding through the rain. He took charge of the wagons and he saved the train. She looked down and her heart was gone. The train moved west but she stayed on. It lonesome dove, a farmer's daughter with a gentle hand, a blooming rose in a bed of sand. She loved the man who was a star, a Texas Ranger, no near and far. They got married and they had a child. But times were tough and the West was wild. So it was no surprise the day she learned that her Texas man would not return to the lonesome dove. Back to back with the Rio Grande, the Christian woman in the devil's land. She learned the language and she learned to fight, but she never learned how to beat the lonely night. The lonesome dove, lonesome dove. She watched her boy grow to a man. He had an angel's heart in the devil's hand. He wore a star for all to see, a Texas lawman legacy. One day word blew into town. It seems the man that shot his father down had robbed a bank in Jericho. The only thing between them and Mexico was Lonesome Dove. Shadows stretched across the land as the shots rang out down the Rio Grande. As the smoke finally cleared the street, the men lay at the ranger's feet. Legend tells to this very day, legend tells to this very day, the shots were coming from an alleyway. And though no one knows who held the gun, there ain't no doubt if you ask someone, Lonesome Dove.